All right. I think I'm live. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Lawyer Spot. It's me, Nate Broady. It's good to see everybody here. Let me look in the chat to make sure I'm not missing people. Hey, what's going on? Christina. Christina. Good to see you. Secret Squirrel. Everybody's here. What's going on, guys? All right. Hopefully we can have some fun. Yes, the lamp is back. Gotta move the lamp over. The lamp is. I've been on the porch for so long I forgot about the lamp. But yeah, lamp is still good. Lamp is actually jealous of now Chair, so we got to deal with lamp being jealous of Chair. But Chair is new Chair. Lamp doesn't like it. I think lamp thinks I give it too much attention. Yeah, I'm talking about a lamp. Just for everybody to know, this is not a toothbrush. It's a baby straw. It's just so much easier to stir things with the baby straw. And now my kid's too old for the straw, so I'm keeping it. But it's not a toothbrush. Even though it does look like a toothbrush. So right now I'm waiting for my special guest, UnCivil Law. We're doing our show called The Lawyer Spot. So we're going to just where we go over just interesting topics in the news, just give our perspective. Vandy, $2 super chat. Thanks. Good morning, beautiful people. Good morning to you too. I did think it was a toothbrush. I know Secret Squirrel. You know what? Before UnCivil Law gets here, I want to ask you guys in the chat a question. I just posted it on Twitter. So if you follow me on Twitter, Broady Nate on Twitter. If you follow me on Twitter, you've probably seen it already. But I want to just ask the people in the chat before you guys start typing away crazy. How fast do you think the fastest vaccine in history? How long do you think it took? What's the record for the fastest vaccine in history? And just think about it. You don't have to put anything in the chat. But what's the record for the fastest vaccine in the history of mankind? Now, some people say, X day, but what do you guys think? I'll give people a second. It's the mumps vaccine, and it took 4 years. So Miss Parker is right, 4 years. Now, under current standards, it takes about the fastest has been 5 years, and that was the Ebola vaccine. So the fastest was 4 years, and the fastest under the current standards, it's 5 years. Am I crazy by thinking that it's going to be almost impossible for them to get a COVID-19 vaccine within the next 6-7 months? Like, that's insane, right? That's insane. So, yeah, I don't know. Like, think about what we're going to be having to go through for 4 years. 4 years, the fastest ever. That's breaking the world record. Oof, it's going to be tough. Oh, look who's here. UnCivil Law.
How's it going?
What's going on? All right. Good. We're talking about how the record of the fastest vaccine in history is 4 years. 4 years. How does that make you feel? Are you now worried that this COVID lockdown thing is going to be happening for a lot longer than just the 18 months that we've been told?
Yeah, I think the 18 to 24 months thing was always pretty optimistic at best, especially when you look at the class of stuff that they were talking about, the coronaviruses in general and what they are. And, the flu and even the common cold are coronaviruses, and our ability to find cures or vaccines that are effective for those are a little bit dubious. And so the idea that we were going to find a cure for this particular disease in the time frame of 18-24 months was pretty optimistic.
Yeah, the problem is that two things. Number one, I feel like now Fauci has just been misleading me, right? He misled me on the mask, right? The masks don't help. The masks, you're stupid. Don't wear masks. Masks are now all of a sudden you got research and everything telling us wear masks. Mask protects you, protects everybody. Masks are 50% reduction in transmission rate just because you're wearing a mask, even if the other person's not wearing a mask. So they lied to us about the mask. And now I feel
a really, really good reason to lie to us. So that makes it okay.
I don't know. You could have told me to work.
And he surely doesn't have any good reasons to lie to us now. So therefore, we can trust everything he says now because he must be telling us the truth because he couldn't possibly have motivations like he did before. Because that's how that works.
And then let's not also forget. So you got the mask thing. And then they're talking about, well, we're talking about what? end of the year, 18 months aspirationally. They're throwing that number out like it's realistic, but that's not a realistic number based on the world record. It's just like saying, what's his name? What's the guy who I now forget? Usain Bolt? Is it Hussein Bolt or Usain Bolt? Well, anyway, the Jamaican sprinter that has the world record, it's like 9 seconds, and you're saying that we got to run it that can run it in 3, or 4.5 seconds, Yeah. Like you got somebody who can beat the world record, who can cut it in half. I don't think it's possible.
Yeah, the famous saying of it's like hiring 9 women to give birth to a baby in a month.
Yeah.
I'm not sure it works that way.
It's totally. But you're in Texas though? How's it going on? And I'm not doxing this man. He's got a big Texas flag in the back of his. Yes.
On the wall. There's a subtle.
So people don't think I'm doxing you. See there's a big. I'm trying to zoom in on it, but he's got a big Texas flag. So he's in Texas.
There's the big ass Texas flag and also the one on the wall. So we got 2 of them for you.
So what's going on there now? Because remember we used to do these streams. And I was in the epicenter of the death, and I'm like, oh my God, it's crazy. Now you're in the epicenter of the death. So
apparently,
how do you experience?
I live in Travis County, where Austin is, and apparently there was a news report that we were like the #1 county for COVID case increase in the United States, like last week or something like that. So I might be a little bit off on my dates or something like that, but something like that. So apparently we're #1 now. Of course, it would have nothing to do with those huge Black Lives Matter protests that were happening in Austin, which you saw in the news.
Of course not.
So it could have nothing to do with the massive number of people that were in very close space, because there were so many of them out and about protesting without masks on and not socially distancing. It would have nothing to do with that, because COVID is resistant to anti-racism. Anti-racism, the cure was in us the whole time.
Well, I think the media has been playing. And this is where I have my issue with the mainstream media, obviously. The media was playing first the anti-lockdown protest, right? That was the big issue with them. Oh, they're protesting, but they're not wearing masks. They're not socially distancing, right?
Yeah.
That was.
When people were protesting like the week before, or even 2 weeks before.
Mm-hmm.
There were protests happening. They were protesting against lockdowns. Well, those protests were very, very bad. And those people were protesting, and they're not social distancing and all those things. So those protests can't be allowed. But the protests for racism or against racism, well, those are really, really good. And our public health officials even told us that the threat of COVID is nowhere near the threat of racism. So therefore, it's totally justified, because that's how disease works or something. I don't know.
Well, let me just $2.99 super chat from 2012 Jameson. Collin County attorney here. No real cases here. I'm not sure. You got to give me a little bit more so I can understand what you're saying. But cool. Thanks for the super chat. I agree. I think what it showed is that the media. I've always understood the media to report facts and then let me come to my conclusions. Right.
Well, that was a mistake.
But I'm saying is that generally the way that you would couch the media? Now you have opinion pieces and you have like the New York Times. They'll say, here's the opinion section. These are our opinions. But then here's the news. The news are just the facts laid out. And I think when it comes to this whole COVID-19 protest thing, it exposed that bias, that media bias. Because in one instance, for right wings, they had the same constitutional right to protest, and they were protesting something that they, even though if I personally disagree with it, you can't. The big knock was, hey, they're protesting and doing this irresponsibly. And then I agree with the protest for Black Lives Matter, just like it seems like the media did. But I would also have made the same determination that this is irresponsible in the effect that we're trying to save lives, and this may be spreading the virus more. And now you have these explosion of viruses. So right. I think I think now the deception is, and I hate even being conspiratorial. Please, I know you people are going to think I'm being like this whole conspiratorial thing, but I hate doing this. It seems like I just heard yesterday they're talking about, well, being outside now doesn't transmit. You can't. It's harder to transmit the virus when you're outside.
That's what I said. I said that 2 months ago.
It's indoors, and that's why the protests didn't really have that effect as if you were indoors in bars and stuff. So that's why you have the bars and stuff. So I think it just makes me feel like they're making excuses for one party, then just saying, hey, then just blankly saying.
I don't think it's really a conspiracy. because conspiracy requires people to be awake enough to like actually come into an agreement and reach a mutual understanding. And I just think, I genuinely think that a lot of these people, their biases is so thick, they just don't see the cognitive dissonance of it's okay to go protest for Black Lives Matter, but it's not okay to go protest for like literally any other reason. And they don't see the cognitive dissonance. So I don't know that it's conspiracy just so much as it is people who are so thick in their biases, they can't see the difference.
Yeah, and listen, I'm all for the Black Lives Matter protest, right? I didn't go out there and protest, but my daughters made signs. We did, I agree with it.
Life matters, Nate.
I have been to a couple of those protests before, to be honest with you. I'm full BLM. I'm not even going to pretend like I'm not, but I am going to say I think it's irresponsible to not, to say the same things about both parties. If you're going to see these conservatives out there protesting their freedoms, we're being irresponsible. You have to then. It just makes sense to say that BLM people out there protesting were doing the same exact thing, and now these spikes were because of both BLM. That in Texas alone, I was looking at the stats. 45% of new cases are in the Black community, right, or in the minority community. That's that I think is the direct effect of these protests, of these young people being out there and just not being responsible. And again, I believe the protests were a good thing, but I think we have to just be honest with both the audience and everyone we do talk to say that was irresponsible, and that is one of the effects that's causing the problem that we have now. Go ahead.
I only would quibble with you slightly in that way you say it's a protest for a good thing, because when it comes to governmental action, we don't really normally try to make those kinds of distinctions. We don't try to figure out whether the protests are good or bad, because freedom of speech is both good and bad. So like whether or not BLM is a good cause or not is a little bit irrelevant to my mind. And whether or not protesting for the end of the lockdowns is good or bad is a little bit irrelevant. Or whether or not protesting against Black Lives Matter. I'm not sure there's anyone who would want to, but if someone would want to, the whole point is to not like make moral decisions as to the value of the speech. It's supposed to protect all the speech. Well, and so like BLM being a good cause, like, well, as far as governmental policy is concerned, we're supposed to be viewpoint neutral, right? We're supposed to be subject matter neutral. Yeah. So if we want to block everyone from meeting in public places, then we might be under an intermediate scrutiny analysis because we're being neutral. But as soon as we start discriminating, for these subjects, but not other subjects. So for Black Lives Matters, it's okay, but not for other things. Well, that's subject matter discrimination. Well, people who are in favor of Black Lives Matter, but not people who are against. Well, that's viewpoint matter discrimination. Well, no. As soon as we start doing that, we're in a whole new world of constitutional analysis.
Well, you're talking about, I agree if you're talking about the government doing that type of viewpoint discrimination. Yes. But I'm talking about me as a private individual saying I agree with one side versus, I'm making a value judgment on a personal opinion, not a legal opinion. Legally, I think you're 100% correct. You can't distinguish between the two. But a personal standard is that I agreed with one and I didn't agree with the other. But I do agree. But my overarching point is that both rights should be protected and both groups should be treated. If you're saying one group doing it is going to cause a higher rate of infections for COVID, you have to say then the other group who's doing the exact same thing are going to cause. Just because you don't like the message, you have to still, come to the fact that both groups
because you don't
are causing a problem.
Particularly because you don't like the message.
That's true.
Right? Freedom of speech is not of much value if it only protects things you agree with, right?
Let me get these super checks. No real COVID cases or courtroom cases. No real COVID cases or courtroom cases, mostly thanks to Dallas. Thank you for the super check, Jameson. Thank you. That's amen to that. Amen to that. Aaron, $10 super chat. In North Carolina, antibody testing has been 70% of the state recovered from COVID. Wow. The data in states including more young people are getting infected, which may have a lower risk of hospitality and death. Yes, that's very good.
Wasn't New York State something like a third in terms of like a similar statistic?
I know in the Bronx, for instance, they said it was a 1 in 4. We had almost 1 in 4 that had antibodies from the survey they took. So I think there's a lot more people infected. But again, this issue has to deal with, and thanks for the super chat, Aaron, a very good point. I think this problem that we're dealing with now has more to do with exponential growth and just understanding the science behind the whole COVID mess. And I think when you add politics to science, that's where you kind of get into this hazmat, one place does one thing, another place does another thing, and you got this explosion. Right now, I think when it comes to COVID, we have to have a national policy that just shuts everything down, coast to coast, border to border, for a certain amount of time, and then we all come back to the reopenings together, and you get the contact tracing, you get the testing up, and then you can put out particular fires than what we have now. Right now, we have thousands of different localities, thousands, 50 different states, all doing their own thing. And like here in New York, we thought we were doing better, but there's no way that New York is going to stay at the numbers that they are now when you got, numbers blowing up in Texas and Florida, and those people are going to be coming to New York, seeding more virus here. So, we need a new policy, and we need to recognize too, if the fastest vaccine that we've ever had took 4 years, we're going to be in this cycle of openings and shutdowns, possibly for the next 2 years. And I think people need to really realize that we're talking about probably the next 2 years of openings and shutdowns. Go ahead.
I was just saying, let it go up. You said 2, like 2.
Yeah, you talking about 4 years? You think it's going to take longer than that?
8. I mean, it's like, yeah.
Wow,
yeah,
wow.
I just think this is going to. I think your earlier point is extremely valid. Like the idea that we're going to come up with a vaccine against this in 18, 24 months is hopeful, optimistic, unrealistic. So, like what are we doing? Are we just wearing masks for the next 2 years? But then New Zealand apparently doesn't have any COVID cases. I think Massachusetts just announced today it hasn't had any new COVID cases. So it suggests that maybe this thing will burn itself out, and maybe we're getting closer to that than not. So it's a little bit hard to take notice of all the news and try to figure out where we are in terms of the threat profile. Because we apparently can't rely on authoritative news sources, because apparently they lie to us sometimes.
And even government officials. Let me Dana McWhite, China shut down the longest, didn't work. No, China shut down, I think, did work. Like China doesn't have 40,000 cases a day. You know what I'm saying? They're in a totally different situation. Don't forget, they have 1 billion people over there, and they're doing a lot. They have their COVID cases. What they have, I think, total is what we have in 2 days. So, China's shutdown was a different type of shutdown. That's a totalitarian regime. You come out your house, you may get shut down type shit. You know what I'm saying? And on top of that, if you were found to have COVID-19 in China, they put you in an app where other people who tested negative can see where you're at to avoid you. So, their shutdown was totally different. That was a shutdown. What we're doing now is kind of like, it's a little something. Let me read these super chats. But Dana, thanks for the super chat. I love Dana. Dana too is a really good guy. There's a Trio Monkey 66. I'd rather get sick from fighting for equality than stay at home for safety as a prisoner of racism. You know what? I agree. But the thing is that it's not about the individual, but it's about who you may infect. Because I would say I would go out there, yes, do that. But if you were to do that, stay away from your family, stay away from other people for 14 days, self-isolate. You know what I'm saying? You'd have to be responsible to everyone else, because if you go out there and get sick and then go in and kill other people, I don't think that helps the cause. I think that hurts the cause. It hurts the cause to kill, maybe your friend's grandmother or something like that. Not to say that you'd intentionally do it, but that seems to be where you'd lead to. What do you think?
Well, I think that's valid too, and what you were saying just was reminding me. There was Michael Knowles from Daily Wire was giving a report yesterday, and there's a clip of it on YouTube where he was reporting this guy speaking in his town hall, and apparently in whatever town he was, their health official had 3 weeks ago said, masks are completely unnecessary. Now they're saying masks are necessary, and he's like, well, were they wrong then, or are they wrong now? Right? So it's like, were they incompetent? Were they lying to us? Why haven't you fired this guy? Or do you not really believe that masks are required now? You're just doing it merely for, show. So 3 weeks ago when he said masks aren't required, you seem to be okay with it. Now you're just like, you're wearing masks. Are you doing it because you believe he was wrong then, right now? Or do you believe he's lying now and you're just doing it for show? Or what's your motivation? So it just reminded me of that clip. So
yeah, no,
that's what I was thinking about.
Well, here's an interesting question from Jameson 2012. Thanks again, Jameson. We cannot do a national shutdown legally or economically. Texas attorney already suing bars for closing. Also, inverse condemnation lawsuits most likely. That is true, but there's first, one thing I want to say about that is that no right is absolute, right? There's always a balancing. The balancing versus safety versus you exercising this right. We find those things in like Second Amendment cases, and we've seen them in other vaccine cases. Where states and localities force people to vaccinate. Even now with your children going to school, some schools say to go to school you have to vaccinate, almost compelled vaccination. So in doing this, it's usually the most extreme version is the strict scrutiny test, where you're really talking about the means that are chosen it has to be narrowly tailored in a way where you can still allow people to exercise those rights, but just in a way that doesn't kill people. I'm trying to. It's a balancing test, and don't get me wrong. That the more extreme, the more how do I say, the more the government wants to infringe on your constitutional rights, the better the reason they have to have that law or regulation. And I think a global pandemic in which we're trying to save millions of lives, the government is making can make an interesting case that yes, compelling people to wear masks is narrowly tailored enough to help combat this virus of public health. What do you think?
Yeah, I just think that the situation that we're in presents so many uncertainties, and what people are willing to accept in the long term. I just don't know that people are really truly willing to accept this uncertainty, mask on, mask off, rolling whatever for the next 2 to 4 to 6 to whatever number of years this will be. I just don't think people are willing to tolerate it. I think people's patience with the lockdown is getting thin. I think their willingness to accept the risk of COVID is growing. I think that the lawsuits that the person alluded to in Texas are signs of that. And the whole just jerking around because no one can plan around it. People can't be free. It's like it's not really in keeping with the American way. So my own state of Texas, which is apparently vacillating and now talking about statewide masks and statewide shutdowns again and all those criticisms, just like it's so much endemic, to use exactly the right word, of the situation that I just don't know that what people are going to be willing to tolerate in the ongoing long term.
Well, even if we just look at the numbers for what they are, right? This is the issue with COVID is not COVID actually killing you, because like 80% of the people are going to survive and probably just going to have a light cough, right? Mm-hmm. It's literally that type of thing. But Dana McWhite actually showed me something on Twitter where Texas has 54,000 hospital beds, right? And those are hospital beds statewide, but for a population of 29 million people. So, we're talking about 2 hospital beds per 10,000 people or something like that. It's like an insane number. So the risk of COVID are the people who are going to the hospital and are going to need hospitalization to recover. And what is it? The average hospital stay for a COVID patient is 14 days. So you're talking about now hospital beds being taken up for 2 weeks by a rush of patients. That's the big concern with COVID is the hospitalization problem, is the run on the healthcare system. And I think that a lot of people just don't understand that piece of it. They think it's, well, I'm going to be okay. Yeah, you're going to be okay. But God forbid you break your arm or you get into a car accident and need to go to the hospital. That's what happened in Italy. People were calling to the hospital. I have shortness of breath. Can you send an ambulance? We can't send an ambulance from this hospital. Why? Because we have no hospital beds. Next thing you know, you're calling and you're getting hospitals 50 miles away. And we all know in an emergency situation, the time factor is the thing that makes a difference. It makes a difference.
Yeah, Texas or more properly, Austin is apparently looking at already converting its convention center like they did in New York, where they converted, what was it? The Madison Square Garden, was it, where they tried to convert it into a field hospital?
Yes. It was the Jacob Javits Center.
Yeah, that's right. It did. Mm-hmm. So they're trying to apparently do the similar thing to our convention centers to prepare it to be a field hospital. So making plans in case that's a thing. They're talking about the number of ICU beds being exceeded. But I don't know, at least for me, because the intubation rate of success is so low. Apparently something like 90% plus of people who are intubated still wind up dying. And so it's been suggested the intubation itself may cause death because they turn up the pressure so high that it winds up just destroying the lungs anyway. So I don't know. If it were me who were being treated, I might very seriously consider a no intubation order just because of the relative risk profile.
Well, I would say I think like 80% of the people who go on ventilators actually don't make it, which is crazy. But hey, if there's a chance, put me on a ventilator. I want to grab to every last second of life. You know what I'm saying? If there's a pill out there that make you live forever, I'm taking that pill.
And maybe in and of itself deprive me of said life.
That's
I don't
true. That's true.
The pressure to be so high, it's ripping apart my alveoli and my lungs, which apparently is what's happening.
I'm just hoping I get a good enough doctor to say, "Hey, doc, his pressure's too high," because at that point, you take a risk either way, right? You take a risk either way. Let me, Jameson, 2012, due process rights under the Administrative Procedures Act. Jameson, you know some stuff, right? And the Texas Administrative Procedures Act says that you have to be compensated. But again, I think you're talking. I think it comes down to compelling government interest. Does the government have a compelling government interest to pass this regulation? And the Supreme Court has said many times before too, when you talk about these regulations, the survival of the government is paramount, right? You can't if the government is the one that is supposed to give you these rights, and there's no government, then obviously you can't have rights and no government to administer them. So it's kind of that situation where I'm not sure if they even have the financial funds to do it. But again, those things should be litigated, because if Texas gives you this right and this due process of letting you be compensated to do this, then hey, you should. And I don't think the APA too. I'm not sure if the APA is applicable, because that would be under the federal statute. But we'll see. We'll see. I think maybe if the Texas statute is. I'm not sure. You may be more familiar with the Texas APA.
Well, the Wisconsin order that was in place, at least at the time, was struck down because of their violation of their equivalent of the APA, because it was a state, or was it Michigan? I forget which one, but one of the two, where it was struck down because of its state-specific law. And I covered that on my channel too. So it may very well be the case that the Texas equivalent of it requires certain procedures that were not followed, which would not surprise me that they weren't followed, if that's indeed the case.
Yeah.
So that would be a basis for a lawsuit right there.
It's people are trying to make some money off us right now, but yeah, you could.
I'm down with that. Let's make some money.
All right, before we get off of COVID and move on to our next topic, let me show you this video. This video, I think you guys should be able to hear it, but this video is Florida Governor Ron DeSantis a couple of weeks ago talking about, now obviously COVID has been devastating to the state of Florida. But I just hate the fact that these things don't age well, and this didn't age well for him. Make sure I turn it all the way up so you can hear. But listen to what happens, and I feel bad that I understand why Chris Cuomo's gloating on it, but check this out.
You got a lot of people in your profession who wax. You got a lot of people in your profession who waxed poetically for weeks and weeks about how Florida was going to be just like New York. Wait 2 weeks, Florida's going to be next. Just like Italy, wait 2 weeks. Well, hell, we're 8 weeks away from that, and it hasn't happened.
What now?
Can't. Nate, can't hear you, man. You put on your mic on mute, remember?
Yep, sorry. I think Chris Cuomo was doing that because him and DeSantis and his brother had beef. But I don't understand why some policy, and this is not only the Republican governor of Florida. California did the same thing. They opened too early, and they have the same problem. So I think a lot of people go on, like on Twitter, you'll see all these Republican governors are idiots, but California is not a Republican, it's a blue state, and they're having the same problem. And I think it comes down to people, for some reason, maybe their health professionals aren't helping them understand how bad this virus can be and how quickly things can get out of control. I don't know. What do you think?
I mean, I mean, with respect, I think that the virus is somewhat overblown. I think that its overall fatality rate's probably 1%, if not a bit lower, because you have to count in all the people who are not diagnosed, all the asymptomatic people. So you have to try to make some estimates in your head about what that is. And so I think that the threat profile is a little bit overblown. I think in particular, as I mentioned earlier, it's not really a threat in open air environments that are not crowded. So for example, my state of Texas, or at least the city of Austin, I'm not sure which technically did it, but they closed tubing on the river, man. Why? They took away my ability to get into a tube and float down a river on a sunny day. How's that a threat on COVID land? I don't know. It's in the middle. I'm assuming a river is pretty socially distanced. So it's like, why is this a problem? That's what I think.
Well, I'll say this. I think there's three things. Number one, the excess death. The things that's convinced me that that I think we're taking it not. I'm on the other side of the fence, and there's three things. Number one, the excess deaths. I think no matter who you are, you have a huge excess death problem. If you go, and you guys can go to the CDC website and see what they do is they track the average numbers of deaths, and they go back for about like 5 or 10 years, and you can see like the average numbers of deaths that they'll expect, and you see during flu season they're higher, during certain times they're higher and lower. Obviously during the summer because more people are out and being exposed to different types of environment. But you can see for COVID, we have a huge excess death. So there are more people, I think up to like there was something like 50,000 more deaths per week that from COVID. And then obviously, so you have that issue. We had that issue here in New York. And the second is just understanding exponential growth. Do the thought experiment. Follow me with the thought experiment. Let's say I have this cup and I want to now create, I take 2 small bacteria. You know how they're so small you can't even see them. And I say, each one, I'm going to put 1 cell in this cup. And that cell is going to divide every second. So every second you go from 1 to 2 cells, sure. 2 to 4. And I say, it's going to take those little bitty cells 24 hours dividing. They're going to divide every second. And it's going to take them 24 hours to fill the cup to the top.
Sure.
So I put the 2 cells in. Question, so now I'm going to ask you, how many cells are in the cup 1 second before 1 second before 24 hours?
Half the cup.
Exactly. That's exponential growth.
Yes.
That's exponential
the way you
growth.
set up the question, it's a classic of logic. The way it's normally phrased is like you have a pond, and you have a pond in which algae is growing, and the algae will double every day, and it will be full in 40 days. On what day is the pond half full? Day 39. Yeah, it doubles every day. Therefore, if it's full on 30, it'll be half full on day 39. So that's exponential growth for you. Yep, I got it.
But what it's meant to show you is that from exponential growth, you for a long time during that exponential growth period, the numbers seem so small. It's like you're like, oh, the cup is just barely anything in a cup. Then 1 second before, now you have half a cup full of stuff, and now the cup is full. And it only took really 2 seconds to get to that point. And from that point, now you got 2 cups. Now you got 4 cups. Now I got a whole room full of stuff because that's exponential. And I think when you talk about states like South Dakota that says we only have 1 case, right? Well, that 1 case that's the 1 case you found. That means you already have it in community. That means you got community spread, right? Because that person that you're testing, you're only testing people who are sick. So now you're testing 1 person who's sick. You got a whole bunch of asymptomatic people, and now you have this exponential growth that occurs. So I think that's the problem where I think people just don't understand what exponential growth and how it can just sneak up on you. And that's what's happening in Texas and I think Florida and Louisiana is that this exponential growth piece is sneaking up on people in a very weird way. So.
Yeah, I mean, obviously with diseases, there are other factors. So, you just want duplication indefinitely. First of all, you'd eventually run out of people. So there's that.
Yeah.
Obviously, it says the problem with every pyramid scheme. Eventually, you just run out of people. You can't keep going forever. But of course, there's other factors in terms of how people behave and where they are and stuff and so forth and so on. But yeah, there's some factor that's relevant to that.
Yeah. Well, let's move on to our next talk. Which was going to be, hold on, let me look at my list again. But so let's talk about Mike Flynn. What do we think about the Mike Flynn stuff? Now, I'll give you, if you want, you introduce it because I think you do a better job explaining the whole Mike Flynn scenario than I do. So can you let the people know what happened with Mike Flynn, just in a nutshell?
Who, me?
Yeah.
All right, yeah, let's try to summarize this. So Michael Flynn is the former national security advisor. He was advisor for like 10 days or something ridiculous before he got fired. But he met with the Russians in preparation to becoming NSA. And he apparently lied, misled, whatever, both the vice president and the FBI. So that was the allegation. Then it later turned out that the FBI probably set him up and tried to get him to fib for the purpose of creating a problem where there wasn't before. So it wasn't necessarily an illegal thing by the FBI, but they were definitely setting him up for apparent political purposes. And then the judge, so the government moved to dismiss. And one second. So the government moved to dismiss, and then the judge said no, and they went to the Court of Appeals, and the Court of Appeals said you must dismiss. And I think it's over unless we go to an en banc or this case somehow gets even weirder. So that's the too long didn't read. He may have lied, but the FBI probably set him up. So it might not have been entrapment, but it was something. I can't hear you, by the way. I don't know if it's me or...
Yes, no, because I muted myself so you didn't hear the background noise here. But I think two things with Mike Flynn. Personally, I think the outcome, I agree with. I feel like one of those Supreme Court justices that like I agree with the outcome but don't agree with the reasoning, and so that's kind of where I'm at with Mike Flynn. I think Mike Flynn, yeah, he lied to the FBI, which I don't agree that lying to the FBI should even be a crime, no felony. I think that's even ridiculous to that point. But I think he did lie to the vice president. He did lie to the FBI. He knew that lying to the FBI was a problem, and he still did it. So, no matter what. And let's not forget also, it was a softball interview. They went in, they said, they didn't put a gun to his head. It was like, asked him questions. He misled them, and they said it was material. Okay, fine. So whatever happened with that, I'm just putting that to the side. My issue is whether prosecutorial discretion could overturn a conviction. And that's my only issue with this ruling, is that Mike Flynn pled guilty, not once, twice, right? He pled guilty twice. And when you plead guilty and the court accepts your guilty plea, you are convicted. You are now at that point a convicted felon. After that, that's when the Justice Department comes in and says, we want to exercise prosecutorial discretion and dismiss the charges. That is essentially overturning a conviction. Now, this is a rare occasion where they try to overturn this conviction before sentencing, but yet it's still the same. They are overturning Michael Flynn's conviction and using prosecutorial discretion as the means to do it, which I don't think legally makes sense. But it seems like, in a split decision with the appeals court, they believe it does. So, I'll leave it up to the judges. But from my understanding, when I've done exoneration cases before here in the Bronx, and when you do an exoneration case, it's even though the prosecutors join us and we all go up together and say, we want, this person to be exonerated. Here's the evidence. And the judge can say no, right? Or yes, it's up to them because the person has been convicted. And I thought this is the way this case was playing out. But again, I think reasonable minds can be reached. So that's my issue with this particular ruling, is that now you're allowing prosecutorial discretion to be a tool to overturn convictions. It gives I think it's too much power to the executive. Go ahead.
Well, I understand what you're saying, and how this would be in state law is obviously variable. So how they do it in New York state law, I wouldn't be able to say. But the idea that the case isn't really over until the sentencing is complete makes sense, because the trial court still has jurisdiction, at least for the purposes of sentencing. So it's a question essentially of how bifurcated the guilt phase and the sentencing phase is or should be, I suppose, because you could treat them as, once you're past the guilt phase, then that phase is just completely done. But the idea that the judge can maybe go back and revisit decisions, or, the judge could always enter a judgment notwithstanding the verdict, because you eventually have a conviction. So as the judge will warn you, as part of the warnings as they are giving you as part of your allocation, you're pleading guilty as is the same as though a jury found you guilty. Well, that goes both ways, because a jury finding you guilty, the judge can say, you're not guilty anyway. And so you pleading guilty, the judge can say, yeah, no, you're still not guilty. So if it has the same operative effect, it has the same operative effect. So is it a JNOV? Is it, a reconsideration of a ruling that was material? As it turns out, I probably shouldn't have excluded that evidence. Oh, I'd like to withdraw my plea after all, that kind of thing. So the idea that the judge can do it and go backwards. So
Yeah,
why
I agree.
why shouldn't the prosecutor be allowed to go backwards as long as the case is still live, and it's still live because the trial court still has jurisdiction because they haven't, hit that gavel yet for the last time.
Well,
so theoretically, you could go back and revisit anything up to that point. It seems logical.
Well, the question is that the exercise in discretion, because the whole case turned on this prosecutorial discretion.
Sure.
I'll say this: after the person is convicted, right, and usually the defendant comes in and says a motion, the prosecutor didn't prove the case, and the judge will say denied or accepted or whatever. And I'm assuming generally in this case is denied. So at the point the person's convicted, right, pled guilty, convicted. We're before sentencing, so we haven't scheduled sentencing yet. At that point, what discretion does the prosecutor have? That's my thing. The prosecutor, it's like they can't prosecute the person anymore. He's already been convicted. And even any recommendation for sentencing are called sentencing recommendations. They're not, the prosecutor doesn't have to give one, right? The prosecutor doesn't even show up to the sentencing. It can just be the defendant. So that's what I'm saying. What discretion to say that this was based on prosecutorial discretion after the person's convicted, after the person's pled guilty, what discretion does the prosecutor have?
No, I totally understand the logical argument. I understand it completely. And as I was trying to point out, it may become an issue of how bifurcated it is. So I think what you're saying makes sense. You could say, well, the guilt phase and the sentencing phase are so bifurcated that you no longer have the decision to drop the case because that doesn't even make sense anymore. You can make your recommendation, you can make no recommendation. You can not show up to the sentencing phase, but your butt is the courts, as it were, and no longer the prosecutor. So you could make that determination. It's logical. And then it just becomes an issue of what does the law support? Now, Michael Flynn in his briefing seemed to be saying that there were other instances where this had happened in the past in other places where even though there was a conviction, there had been no sentencing and cases were thrown out. So apparently this wasn't the first time this had ever happened. So I haven't looked into it enough to know, but I'll take their word for it. So okay. So under federal law, can the executive drop it up until the last moment? I guess the answer is yes. I mean, what you're saying makes sense as a matter of a logical rule that you could differentiate it. So if you wanted to split it that way, that makes sense. And that's just a question of, well, how was the federal system set up? And apparently the answer to that question is, well, they're not so bifurcated that you can't go back apparently to square one if you're so inclined.
Yeah, and maybe that might be the case. But again, it was a 2-1, it was a 2-1 ruling, and I don't think this type of thing will probably ever happen again.
At least for me, I thought the majority did a very good job of eviscerating the dissent. They did a very good job of addressing all the dissent's point. And I thought it was very persuasive to me.
I did. I thought I just think, just as a practitioner, because let's say even in sentencing, you could bring up things that you cannot bring up at trial, right? At sentencing,
sure, absolutely.
At sentencing,
you can bring in all kinds of stuff.
I can bring, I can load. So
let's bring it all in. Bring all that crap in. It's fine.
So it is a totally different. Different animal.
Right.
And I'm just saying, I think this case is going to hinge, and I think any case, anytime something like this happens again, it's going to hinge on the fact of what discretion is the prosecutor exercising after conviction. And for people saying that, I think people don't understand when the jury comes back and says you are guilty. At that particular time, you are convicted. You are a convicted felon. You may not get any time. The judge may say released on your own recognizance.
Should I give you a very technical correction?
Go ahead. Sure, of course.
Okay, this is such a pedantic correction. I'm so sorry, but technically speaking, even in New York, it is not the moment the jury comes back and says you're guilty. Technically speaking, it is not entered until the judge actually enters it. So there is a slight difference there. So that's such a pedantic point. I'm so sorry.
No, but you're right. You're right because the jury comes back and says they're guilty. You have your motion by the defendant to overturn because the prosecutor.
That's right.
And then the prosecutor says,
no.
Yeah, and then they entered. So yes, so as soon as the judge, but that happened in this case. The judge entered.
I understand.
So you're right. So yeah.
So even it was such a pedantic point. I was like, I don't know if I want to make this correction, but okay.
No, but it's a good point to make. It is a good point to make. But that actually happened in this case.
Yes, it did.
So with Michael Flynn, I think we can say this. We both agree on the outcome, but we don't agree on the reasoning to get there. Right? I can say that's fair.
Yeah. Now, let me ask you this question: Do you think that what do you think is, let me put it another way, what do you think is the correct reasoning to get there? Because I'm not sure if I really understood that point. So I obviously understood how the judge got there. How would you have gone there that was different?
Well, I wouldn't have how would I have gotten there?
So why do you think the result is correct? What are your other reasons for thinking the result is correct, Nate?
I think I think legally the result isn't correct. I think legally the result's not correct legally. I think morally, I think the result's correct because I think Michael Flynn, I think Michael Flynn's prosecution was a political prosecution. He was being prosecuted because he was politics, and the FBI was out to get him and did whatever they could to get him. So, and all of that, I believe his prosecution should have been thrown out. Yes, I honestly believe that. But I think the legal reasoning put forward by the Trump administration and by the judge is just insufficient to overcome this issue of this prosecutorial discretion. If they're hinging it on prosecutorial discretion, then I think they would need more to convince me that is an appropriate, that there is some discretion the prosecutor has after the guilty plea has been entered by the court and they're putting it on for sentencing.
That's fully fair. So you just view it as a real bifurcation, and so you can't go past back the veil. I'm like, okay, that makes sense. I get that. Now let me ask you about a different guilty plea that's currently happening as we speak, because I don't really completely understand why it's happening. The Golden State Killer, his guilty plea is currently being accepted. Now, first of all, the way it's being accepted is bizarre because I was watching the video and it seriously looks like it's happening in a hotel ballroom. So apparently we're holding court at a hotel ballroom because that's what it looks like we're doing. There's like a stage with like a podium and tables. It looks like a damn hotel ballroom. So apparently that's what we're happening. But this guy is pleading guilty to murder in the first times like 17. And all kinds of other stuff and a whole bunch of things. And apparently the plea deal is, well, we're not going to give you the death penalty. Now, I don't understand this because it's California. California has a moratorium on the death penalty anyway.
Yeah.
And they haven't executed someone in I don't even know how long. And even assuming that they ended the moratorium, the guy is 78, I think.
He's not making it, yeah.
He's in horrible health. If you listen to him plead, I mean, he's like, he may drop dead in the middle of this hearing if that's how bad it is. So I don't understand what his incentives to plead are. We're going to spare you the death penalty. Like, okay, first of all, there is no death penalty. Even if there is, you'll never, first of all, you're unlikely to be able to convict me before I die. I'm not going to exhaust all my appeals before I die. And as a matter of law, as long as your appeals are still ongoing and you die, then you're considered to be not guilty. Well, because you still have the right to your mandatory appeals. So what is your incentive if you're 78 to plead guilty? Like, well, okay, give me the death penalty. What do I care?
Well, I'll tell you, there are two incentives.
I'm a nice guy? Apparently not.
No, the financial incentive. And the financial incentive is this person has a house. This person may have assets. This person may have all this stuff. And to get the free attorney, you have to be almost indigent, right? People think that you go to court and they give you free attorneys. No. The free attorneys go to people who can't afford an attorney. One will be provided to you. Yeah. He may not be in that position where he can afford an attorney. He can, now you're talking about putting your house up. Now you're putting it on your car. Now you're talking about taking away all these assets you thought were given to your kids. Now you're talking about making someone.
He's going to lose all that anyway. They're going to sue him out of oblivion. Well, the guilty plea is going to be admitted in his civil hearing. And, they're going to take all that money. They're going to take all of it from him anyway.
Well, that even though that's another process, but just fighting a lawsuit could now just, that itself would ruin it. I'd rather have to fight it in civil court than have to just give it away in criminal court, because you're still going to have to pay for those attorneys. You're still going to have to do all this. You know what I mean? I understand. And you look at the strength of the case. The DNA evidence, I think, is just overwhelming.
The case is solid, but the case is also unbelievably complex because, again, as I mentioned, we're talking about something like 17 murders. We're talking about unknown numbers of sexual assaults, and the list of criminal crimes goes on and on and on and on. And so he'd probably just die before we got done with discovery. But we're not talking about a jury. We're not talking about going to a jury for like 2 years.
Well, hold on.
Because the defense needs all kinds of time to review all this stuff.
Well, but just one thing with discovery too. Usually it's like, well, I don't know how they do it, but usually we just turn like especially a case like this, you turn everything over.
I'm just talking about I'm talking about the practicalities of going through it, preparing a defense, because each charge has to be considered separately.
That's true.
Preparing a defense for each of them, all the expert witnesses, because you're going to have to at least have some expert witnesses.
How much does that cost? How much does that cost
for the state? Well, for the state too.
Yeah,
there's numbers of expenses.
But that,
so it's like, yeah. So I'm pleading guilty because I want to keep my assets, but I'm going to lose all those anyway. I want to save my reputation. That was screwed.
Not
I'm a nice guy. No, apparently not so much. I'm not that nice a guy because I'm a multiple murderer.
This guy has a wife. Assaulter. This guy has kids. This guy has people he cares about. And I'm thinking, you know, you push those buttons to get this plea. You push those buttons. If he was just a pure psycho that was alone, he would say, "Yeah, let's do it." But you know, I think he was a cop. He has all those pressures that I think regular people have, and he's got to evaluate whether. You know, shit, I'm 78. I'm not going to live through this shit anyway. Yeah, put me in jail for the last 2 years. All right, whatever. But, you know, let my family, he probably put everything in his wife's name already, trying to hide those assets. We know the game. Angry Roach for $5. I guess it was Flynn's karma after he got let Janet lock her up. Yeah, but you know what, though? I think any political prosecutions are wrong. And I think what happened to Flynn, let's just be honest, was wrong. You know, I think, don't get me wrong, I think him being associated with Trump, and I think he was, you know, kind of, it's funny because I was arguing with somebody earlier, not today, I think a couple of days ago, about Mike Flynn, and they were like, oh, he was such this is Trump bad people. Trump is just an idiot for hiring Mike Flynn. I said, well, don't forget, he was Obama's DNI guy for 4 years, you know, so Obama hired him, you know what I'm saying? So it wasn't like Mike Flynn was some slouch. He was, you know, he was the director of intelligence under Obama. So, you know, I think sometimes our political lenses let us not understand the facts of what's actually going on. So
I think the FBI played dirty, and I think that they do it more often, and I think they should get busted for it more often. I think Flynn is the tip of the spear when it comes to the FBI doing this. Like 18 USC 1001, which is lying to the federal officials. It's like their favorite charge in the whole world. I think it's so easy to get you for it. Because you just have to lie to a federal official, and you know it's so easy. So it's their favorite thing in the whole world. So they set him up for this from square one for political reasons, and it's not the first time nor the last time, and it happens to people who are not even political. The FBI manufacturing crimes against people is a thing that happens, and so I was happy that they got busted for it. And I can only hope they get busted more because it's disturbing. Maybe the FBI should investigate crimes that actually happen rather than manufacture them. That'd be nice.
Well, but, you know, it's easy. It's easy to go have a conversation and get the person to lie to you. You don't know when you're an investigator, people lie to you all the time. You know, so I don't know. I think it gives the FBI too much power to have this whole lie to the FBI, and you know, I don't know. I'm just totally against that. I think you got to do real police work. You know, people are going to lie to you. That's just part of the human condition. I think there's a freedom of speech aspect to it too that I won't get into now. But you know, it is what it is. So let's talk about let's move on to our next piece, which is going to be police reform. Now, I want to say one thing. I watched the arraignment of the cop in the Brooks case in Atlanta.
Yeah, I'm still like, why?
And you know,
this is the most messed up prosecution I can remember seeing in a while.
Did you see my last video on it?
I did see your last video. I thought it was great.
Where the one where you see him pointing the taser and a guy pointing the gun at him at the same time.
Yeah.
I don't understand. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I mean, the idea that it's not self-defense is insane. And some people were saying, oh, he was doing it for revenge out of anger. I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. I mean, you just saw him and his partner get physically assaulted, tackled to the ground, you know, get the taser out. He swiped at the guy. I don't know if he hit him or not, but he's at least trying to physically assault him. He's tried to tase him. And now he's pointing the taser back in their direction, trying to use it. And that's not self-defense. Get out of here. Get out of here with this. So the idea, I mean, I've covered lots of police abuse stuff on my channel. I covered qualified immunity quite a lot. It's one of the reasons that when Legal Eagle posted something on qualified immunity, I decided to make a video about it. Because I'm like, I probably know more about this than he does. So the police definitely go too far. Lots of times they went way too far, you know, with the knee on the neck thing. I mean, they deserve something, whatever they're criminally liable for. It's like, that's horror show. They do all kinds of things where QI should be denied if I had my say about it. But the idea that this was a bad shooting, I'm like, no, this is a if it were me as a civilian, I'd be covered. You know, I mean, I have a threat of death or grievous bodily harm in this situation. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, we no longer posed a threat. He no longer posed a threat because those things can only be fired twice. And the officer knew that had only been fired twice. I'm like, really? You're expecting him to be able to count to 2 successfully when he's just been tackled, hit, and all that, and you're expecting him to keep track of what things have been fired, how many times? Good luck with that.
You remember the right hook to the side of the head? You remember that? It's
the officer did it out of pure hatred. He did it out of revenge. He knew the thing had only been fired twice. I'm thinking to myself, F you, all you people. I like to see you be able to do it under that level of stress. Good luck, you know?
And the weird part about it is that the prosecutor 2 weeks before says a taser is a deadly weapon, and charged officers.
Yeah. Apparently, it was a deadly weapon 2 weeks before. What happened, Nate?
And then let's not forget, like a couple of months before that, the Georgia Supreme Court, tasers are deadly weapons, you know, and now
they're a firearm according to Georgia law.
Yeah,
we read the relevant law. Yeah, they're apparently a firearm as far as Georgia law is concerned. Okay,
I just don't understand. Don't get me wrong. What's wrong is wrong. And what happened to George Floyd was wrong. I honestly think what happened to like when you go through these cases, I think not all cases are the same, because I think a lot of times people just look at race and don't look at the parts that are going down. George Floyd obviously was horrible.
Are you telling me that every case might have to actually be considered on its facts?
Yes,
and maybe it's possible that George Floyd can be one thing, and this other case can be another thing, because they actually differ on the facts.
Well, you know what? But the hard part about that, though, the hard part about that is that understanding that there is a systemic problem in the United States with policing and just having this conception of the minority community being a little bit more aggressive and more violent, and that you have to kind of police them in a different way than you would have to police different communities. I do understand that piece of it, because I've even experienced that. But I think you at that point understand that you have to step back and judge, like you're saying, each individual's instance separately. For instance, like and I'll tell you, I think Trayvon Martin was a murder. I think the Eric Gardner was, unfortunately, that was a homicide, and that cop should have been charged. But I don't think let's say the one that happened in what's the one that happened in Ferguson.
Yeah.
I don't think that one was
a homicide.
So either. I don't think the one in Atlanta was a homicide. You know, so when you look at the facts, and I think you can clearly see, like, you know, in some instances, these things are gray, and you know, officers are going to make mistakes. But then there's a difference between making a mistake or doing something that's within the bounds of the law, and just doing something that's crazy that's not within the bounds of the law. And I think we have to start distinguishing those two. George Floyd, I think, is a perfect example of something that was obviously outside the bounds of the law. That cop should be prosecuted and go to jail for the rest of his life, and his buddies. But I think in Atlanta,
not so sure about the buddies part, but we can negotiate on that. But yeah, but the principle, definitely, for sure.
Yeah. Well, the guy that was you don't like about the guy for the 2-day thing, right? The guy who was there for 2 days.
Yeah, that guy. I mean, how much liability can we really throw on this guy's head? You know, so I think he needs to be dismissed. And yeah, that's why I'm actually like adjudicating this like a reasonable person and looking at. I'm even differentiating between cops in the same instance. Who did what exactly, and what is their mental state, and what is their physical state, and what is their relative liability? I'm trying to look at this like, you know, a judge might.
Yeah, but listen, but one wrong. Like if I was that judge in the Atlanta case yesterday, I would have been talking about ROR. I'd have been like, this is not something I want to get bailed.
I'd give him a ROR.
Yeah,
did he not get a ROR?
No, $500,000. I would have been saying this is ROR bullshit right here. I'd be like,
that's
you got to show me more.
Yeah, no, I give an ROR. For those who don't know, ROR means release on your own recognizance. It means we release you without conditions. But no bail, no money, no conditions. Please just come back to court.
But you're saying you're saying that, not understanding that this judge has to be elected back to the bench, though. We can say that. That judge, though, that she's got to go to the voters and say, but if I was a judge, like, you know, where I didn't have to worry about re-election, that's an ROR for me. I'm letting you go. I don't think the case is strong enough to.
Well, maybe we shouldn't elect judges, but now I live in a state that elects judges, and so maybe I'll run for judge. So, you know, vote Blackleaf in your upcoming election, I suppose. Blackleaf for Travis County judge.
But
He'll
now,
actually look at the facts before him and judge them accordingly.
you know,
That'll be my campaign.
one thing that is scaring me to death now with all this anti-police sentiment is that New York City just passed this whole thing where they're taking $1 billion off of the police budget.
Mm-hmm.
That scares me to death because
what's the NYC budget?
Their police budget is $6 billion. So I think it's $1 billion.
So it's 1.6. That's a lot.
Don't get me wrong. I'm all for reforming the police, but I believe that you have to do it in a responsible way. People in the streets screaming, defund the police.
Apparently, we're supposed to defund them. Apparently, we're supposed to defund them and not have police anymore. And I do love the videos from the people like in the Chaz Chop, where there's like, is there any white person here with experience in security who can help us? Like, for example, a police officer.
Well, don't they have
this
Chaz has cops?
This guy, there's the video of the guy filming the graffiti, and like, this is our thing, and he gets mugged. He's like, thief, thief, thief. I'm like, maybe we should have some sort of law and police who could enforce the law. That might be great.
They have cops. They have the Chaz cops.
Yeah, that's super encouraging. Yes, the people cosplaying with their bulletproof plastic shields and their spiky leather jackets, and yeah, these people, these are definitely the people I trust for law and order. We have abolished the police only to immediately replace them with police. We don't believe in walls, but let's put up barriers that says Chaz Chop and borders. We don't believe in borders or barriers, except we do. And yeah, we don't believe in cops and oh my God.
Yeah,
the only thing I have to figure out now is which of the Chaz Chops lawsuits to cover. Because if I start covering them all, I will cover nothing else ever. Well, there's already been 2 federal ones filed, so I have to figure out which of the many Chaz Chop lawsuits to follow and just ridicule for the rest of time.
But it's funny because I'm going to say it. Those lawsuits aren't going anywhere, right?
No.
Right, they're not going anywhere.
They're not going anywhere. No,
because of the whole and there's a concept in law for the what's it called the scarce resources argument, where
no affirmative duty.
Yeah, is it your boy Scalia? Scalia was the one that procedural due process where the police don't have to say.
I don't know if Scalia is my boy. Scalia is old and busted. Gorsuch is the new hotness.
Well, hey. But let's not forget, it's Scalia who came down with the ruling. Police don't. And all right, so let me TLDR this real quick for the fans. All right, so there was a case. There was a case in which a woman had a restraining order against her husband. Her husband was threatening her. Blah 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 blah. She goes to the police. She says, "Hey, here's a restraining order. My husband's there. He's threatening me."
Winnebago County.
I believe so. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
So Shaw. Yeah. So she goes and she says, "Hey, enforce the restraining order, right? He's there, blah, blah, blah." The police didn't do it, right? They didn't enforce the restraining order. So she sued. She was like, "Hey, I went to court. I did everything right. I had this restraining order and I gave it to the police. And they saw the guy and they didn't arrest him. So, correct. Give me money." And the Supreme Court said, it's
a sad situation.
No, it was horrible. Yes. It was horrible because they killed that woman. But the fact
I don't think they killed the woman, but they definitely killed her kids.
Yes. They killed her kids.
3 of them, I think. Yeah,
but the ruling, Scalia said in his ruling that because of the scarce resources, the government has to determine what law, especially the executive, and the court couldn't force the executive to enforce certain laws in certain ways. They just didn't have that authority. So, based on the scarce resources argument and the separation of powers, so that's why these Chaz lawsuits aren't going anywhere, because you can't force the police. The police in area, you can't force that. You can't. They just don't have that authority.
When it comes to the Chaz Chop and my potential coverage, I feel like you might be missing it. It's not about the destination. It's about the journey. It's about my ability to mock and ridicule and highlight the contradictions and the insanity that is the Chaz Chop every step of the way. And we're just going to have the graphic from the TV show Chopped, and maybe we'll bring in their stuff for your first round on Chopped. And then we'll just do that. Yeah. So it's not about the journey. The journey is these lawsuits are not going anywhere. But the destination is the lawsuits aren't going anywhere. It's about the journey. It's about to fully experience the joy that was Chaz Chop. Chaz Chop, we hardly knew you.
I honestly feel sorry for those people who are filing these lawsuits, though, because I honestly think they're right. It's like, we pay for police, we do all this, and we only thing we're doing is asking them to just enforce the law. You know what I'm saying? Enforce the law, but
someone was saying this to me on another stream I was doing recently. It's like, well, if that's true, what's the point of the government? And I said, well, the fundamental point of government is to keep us free. And these people in Chaz said they wanted freedom and they got it. So, they got what they asked for. So, deal with that, I suppose. We want to be free. Okay, we're free. We live in a place with a person who calls themselves a warlord. Well, geez, who could have saw that coming? Sometimes it feels that the left in general, and correct me if you think this is unfair, but it feels like the left in general feel that without institutions, without structures, institutions in general, let alone the police, that people would behave civilly to each other, they would be nice to each other, that we don't need all this for people to behave in a certain way. And one of the conservative ethos is that, no, not so much. People are kind of crappy to each other, and we need these institutions to do it. So it seems like this is part of a left ethos, that if we just abolished the police, abolished the government, abolished institutions, that people would be able to live free, and they would live in some sort of anarcho-communism world that would somehow work. Did I mischaracterize that, or what?
No. I agree 110. There's really nothing you said I disagree with. You didn't mischaracterize.
One of the things conservative speaks for institutions, and the reason they speak for institutions is because institutions are hard. Here's the conservative ethos. The conservative ethos is that society is hard, civilization is hard, institutions are hard, anarchy is easy. People behaving in the wild, is easy. So when we create these structures, we should be cautious in our reform demolition efforts. We should not remove the fence from the middle of the field before we realize why it was put there in the first place. And the left is like, we don't need boundaries or borders pretty much of any description. We don't need categorization, because all categorization and all things restrict. When we put things in boxes, not everything can live in boxes. So let's just abandon all the boxes. And the conservatives are like, no, actually, people are kind of crappy to each other, and we saw that in the Chaz Chop.
Well, hold on. I think you're making more distinction between not left and right, because you could still have an authoritarian left and authoritarian right, for instance. But what I think you're making a distinction between libertarian and conservatism, because a libertarian is like, more personal freedoms, less government structure, less power to the government, more institutional freedoms for individuals, versus more that structured authoritarian. So I think the distinction you're making is more conservative.
That's a fair point, and I would have my same problems with my more libertarian as well, because the libertarians have the same exact problem. It's like, all government needs to do is enforce contracts. I'm like,
yes, correct. Yeah, that's more the
I don't know about that one, my friends of the libertarian right. I'm not really feeling it from the great, I've actually studied a little history and read, and I'm not really feeling that, if government just enforced contracts, that would end super duper well. So we may need institutions beyond that.
Well, let me go to Rowan. Thank you for the $10 super chip. But Rowan actually has a very good point. He put, Nate Broady, what about Robert Barnes' argument that there is an exception to conspiracy by government not to enforce law? I've never heard of that.
I don't know what that means.
I
don't even understand what that means intellectually. Is it conspiracy by the government not to enforce the laws? The government has agreed not to enforce the laws. Is that what that says?
Maybe that's what I'm assuming that he's saying. But I do want to. But I want to say this. I think the case that's on point, the Supreme Court case, that was, what is it, like a 7-2 decision that says that the government, you cannot force the government, you can't force the police to enforce the laws. It's a constitutional issue in terms of separation of powers, because the court can't enforce it's just like with Mike Flynn. The court can't enforce the prosecutor to prosecute, nor can the court enforce the police to police. I know it sounds silly, but that's technically what it is. I know it's sad. I know it's probably people are probably confused out there. Like, Nate, what are you talking about? This is crazy, but that's just the law as we live under.
The Constitution essentially sets out negative rights, not positive rights. The government is required to not do things to you, not to do things for you. So the government is required to not deprive you of your First Amendment, to not deprive you of your Second Amendment, to not deprive you of your right to property, to not deprive you of due process. But they aren't required to give you very much. So the government leaving you alone is a viable option, and libertarians would like that very much. And so again, I guess they got what they wanted. Summer of Love, Block Party, and all. You know what? I was multiple shootings.
One thing I'm thinking about, like the big issue now that's been coming up, especially with this these can the government force individuals to follow, let's say, constitutional protections? Because like you're saying, it's a negative right to the government. The Constitution is saying the government can't do these things, but it also gives the government a positive role. The government can only do these things that are listed here, within these bounds. So
for the federal government, for sure.
Yeah, for the federal government. So what I'm saying is that for instance, Robert Barnes, I'm bringing up Robert Barnes again because he makes the distinction that Section 230 for copyright,
CDA? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure. that allows us to do things like this, and where if we violate someone's copyright, then YouTube is immune yes. from the civil law, Section 230.
Yes.
So Robert Barnes and Viva, all they both are saying that you could fix that by adding a line to the law that says, subject that the companies subject that they follow First Amendment provisions, or have the same type of scrutiny on the First Amendment. I actually think that would lose. I would think that would be unconstitutional, and the reason would be the civil rights cases. Remember the civil rights cases back in 1800s, after the Civil War, the civil rights cases which established state action. And what happens is the government wanted to stop discrimination in public venues and public things. So you had the civil rights cases where you had the federal government. The federal government passed a law. Congress passed laws that said you can't discriminate against Black people in certain areas, and they were extending the federal law to individuals, saying individuals had to now follow these prohibitions against federal law. And the Supreme Court says you can't do that because the prohibitions against this conduct is only for the federal government. So the federal government couldn't force individuals to follow follow, let's say, the First Amendment or anything like that, because that would eventually be violating their rights. So the civil rights cases said that if you wanted to bring that type of suit, you had to do it based on government action. You had to have a government actor, because you couldn't do that. So I'm thinking if you add that now text to 230, you'd be doing the same thing you did in the civil rights cases, because you don't have state action in that case. Well,
there's a bit of a difference. There's a bit of difference in 230, because 230 is granting an immunity that Congress didn't have to grant in the first place. So 230 could not exist, and if 230 did not exist, then presumably Twitter et al. Could be liable for what people published. In fact, those were the cases before. There was Prodigy and there was CompuServe.
Yes.
Or the cases before that. I forget. I think 230 was overturned in CompuServe, but I couldn't tell you for sure. Anyways, but so if the government wants to give you an immunity, presumably they could choose on what basis to grant that immunity. So they could say, well, we're only going to give you this immunity. We don't have to give you in the first place if you do X, Y, Z. So I understand the civil rights cases, like business, you may not discriminate, but they weren't like giving you anything. It would be the equivalent would have been like, we will give you money, but we won't give you money if you discriminate. Well, that would have been like the equivalent.
Well, the argument is that we license businesses, so you had to do this to continue your business, to have your business license to follow the law, because those are usually the arguments for businesses.
Again, the business licenses were under state law.
Yeah.
So the businesses are being licensed by a state entity. So if the state of South Carolina or state of Texas,
which they can do,
then we might be in a different kind of argument, because we're only going to regulate. We are granting you a business license. We don't have to, and it may come with some conditions.
Yes.
So if you want to be a business, you have to do these things. The problem with the federal government is the federal government didn't create the businesses. They don't create the business licenses. So they can't create as a condition to granting a business license. They didn't create it in the first place. You must do this stuff. But they are the ones granting this immunity. They've preempted the field, because all this all this liability would exist as a matter of state law.
That's true.
Whether or not someone is engaging in defamation by republication, which was the argument, right? When Twitter et al. Is they're engaging in defamation by republication. Okay, well, it's a state law question. All right, now the federal government says, aha, we are going to preempt the field because we can. We are taking all that stuff and whoop, we are saying, no, you can't do this. And we can do that because of the supremacy clause. So we have preempted the field and we're using interstate commerce as our method because of course we are. And we are granting you now an immunity we didn't have to grant you. Great. So the federal government could not grant the immunity, or they could condition the immunity. Now, I'm not necessarily sure it's a good idea to condition the immunity on you must follow the First Amendment, because then every service becomes 4chan. Every service just devolves into trolling that completely disrupts the purposes for the platform. So I'm not sure that's a good way to write it. However, I'm sympathetic to the idea that we should try to figure out a way that requires some sort of political neutrality. So as a conservative, I'd like to not destroy everything because 230 is doing so much good for whatever problems it might have, but it's not God. So I can say simultaneously, I'd like to reform 230. I'd like to figure out a way to limit 230's application. Also take note that I'd like to do so with some caution as I'm trying to figure out a way to fix this without breaking everything. So that's kind of where I stand on that.
No, I agree, and I like your reasoning, but I'll have to look into it more because I think you're right. I think 230 allows YouTube to exist. Without 230, we couldn't do this YouTube stuff. So it's gonna be interesting on maybe reforming it. But I think now, I think if Trump doesn't win, I think 230 is here to stay. But we'll see, because I think there's just too much money and power.
Well, both people on the left and the right. Both people on the left and the right don't like 230, just like it for different reasons. The left doesn't like 230 because they don't have to censor what they would consider to be hate speech. So the left would presumably like to amend 230 so that you only get immunity as long as you censor hate speech, which we're going to define on the fly, which raises some potential First Amendment problems. What makes the rights argument a little bit easier is that some of these concepts are at least well defined. So we can say politically neutral or viewpoint neutral or subject matter neutral, because these terms have understood legal meaning. So the rights idea of modifying 230 is a little bit easier, where the left says, well, we want to do it where if you don't censor hate speech. Now we have to come up with a definition of that, and we have to do it presumably in a viewpoint subject matter neutral way, because the government can't regulate based on viewpoint or subject.
Yeah.
So we have to figure out a way to ban hate speech without doing it based on viewpoint. Good luck. That'll be challenging.
Well, hold on, but what is? I can't say it. But what's the famous quote from the case? Go to hell, you blah blah commie. What was it? The one there was a quote in the Supreme Court case where they said it was fighting words, and I forgot what the guy said, but it was
I don't remember.
You go to hell, you God, blah and blah blah blah. And they were like, that's hate speech, and it was okay, but that's but today it would be pedantic, versus.
Oh yeah, no, one of the I love one of the major crises in early American law was because we're talking way earlier, back when Philadelphia was the capital of the United States. There was a crisis with France because the United States didn't want to punish a guy who insulted a French guy for saying that he was a scamp. The failure of the United States to criminally punish this guy created an international incident in early American history. It is the basis of the Alien Tort Act.
Oh,
that's how the Alien Tort Act came to be. The Alien Tort Act came to be because one French guy called the French ambassador a scamp, and we didn't want to do anything about it, and it created an international crisis. Good times.
Let me get to these two questions from Jeremy Pace. Jeremy, thank you for your super chat. Sorry it took so long to get to them, but we're in a train of thought. Here we go. Did you see YouTube lawyer Legal Eagle suing the federal government?
I did. I covered it on my channel.
I think it's BS.
We're covering it every step of the way. We're covering this lawsuit.
He's covering it.
Gavel to gavel, man.
I am not covering the lawsuit. I think it's BS. I think it's
about the journey.
Yeah, I don't know. You're asking, from my understanding, he's asking for the confidence not confidential, but for the what's
secret.
The word I'm looking for? Yeah, for the classified evidence that they took out of Bolton's book or the review for the Bolton. Is that? Am I right with that?
Basically, yes.
Yeah, and no court is going to allow him to do that under a FOIA request. This is active intelligence information. I don't think you're going to get that out of a FOIA request. Yeah, I don't know. It just doesn't make any sense. And the review process is secret in of itself, So I don't know. It doesn't.
Yeah, and a judge already looked at it in camera, and a judge already said that it was properly classified. So I don't see that going anywhere. So Legal says this is not a stunt. I'm like, okay,
it's a stunt. Yeah, it's a stunt.
Well, at least he's admitted becoming an activist, so we got that going for us.
Yeah, I know he was. It's like don't get me wrong. I love Legal. I watch also. I disagree with him sometimes. That was a lot of the times, but I do think that I think he went a little too far with this. But we'll see. He may have something. He may found some interesting piece of the law. But do I think he's going to get classified information from this lawsuit? No, I don't think so. I don't think it's happening.
No.
This guy said he would love to see us review some law movies for accuracy, like My Cousin Vinny. You know what? Before I became a prosecutor, my favorite show was Law and Order. Then after I became a prosecutor, it was still my favorite show. But then when I would always notice like the bullshit, I'm like, they don't do this. This is all BS. So, but we can go over some. I don't know if you want to do some legal reviews of some of these movies. What do you think?
Works for me.
Yeah. You know what?
We could definitely do a debate on whether or not the jury in 12 Angry Men came to the right conclusion or not. I'm not sure they did.
Hey, for Jeremy, we're going to do My Cousin Vinny. Jeremy, that's number one on our list. We'll take care of it for you. Thanks for the $5 super chat, also, by the way. So it seems like but I guess the legal thing. I'm not covering it because I just thought it was just like I was like, really, yeah, come on, really, like. Okay, but hey, it may work out for him. If it works out for him, I'll have egg on my face. But I think it's a denied, pretty fast. So
he might get some of the stuff. Like he's also asked for some of the internal review manuals and internal review processes. So he might be able to get some of that. He might be able to get some of that process stuff that he doesn't already have. But the idea that he's going to actually get the underlying materials, it seems doubtful.
And that itself could be classified. The way they review the materials could be classified. That
possible.
Yeah. This is crazy. So let's move on to our next the Supreme Court terms that have been around this,
which is still going.
All right. So me and my friend over here, I got to do over here because it's reverse. We've been having an interesting discussion between originalism and textualism. Now, I myself find myself to be on the progressive front when it comes to this type of understanding Supreme Court. So I believe the law evolves, right? I believe now Scalia will be the first, Justice Scalia, he'll be the first to slap me in the face and says, well, if you think the law should change, then there's a process for that. It's called amending the Constitution.
Yes.
You don't read stuff that's not in there. Roe v. Wade, I'm against because it's not in there.
Or going to the legislature. You could have done it legislatively too.
Yes. So that's Scalia's argument. Yes, I agree. It slaps me in the face because you allow judges to then more or less create the law instead of legislature. So I agree. There are holes with the progressive view, but I tend to believe that eventually, what the word, arms meant back in 1776 is different than what it means in 2010. So there has to be some progressive outlook on it.
Fighting words.
Yes. But I do want to go back to but for everyone who doesn't understand these terms, generally, if you're an originalist, what you do is you go back to what the founders or whoever created the legislation, what they originally meant, what they intended of what they were passing, and then you try to impose that on today's reasoning. And so an originalist would say, what did the founders think, or what did the people who wrote this law thought, and what were they trying to pass, and then try to understand it in that context. And a textualist will also look at the actual words on the page and say, well, what does this mean today, and can you logically understand the law in this particular meaning, the words on the page? That's why it's called them textualists versus originalists. And generally 99.99% of the time, if you're a textualist, you're going to agree with the originalist, right? You're going to say, what does the text say? What was the original meaning? But now in the recent case when it comes to Bostock, now this was the case that the Supreme Court said that the civil rights section, was it section
Title 7.
Title 7, now protects the term sex protects members of the LGBTQ.
So you can't fire people who are gay in the workplace. You can't fire people who are transgender in the workplace. That's what the Supreme Court said in Bostock.
Because the 1964 Civil Rights Act covered that term sex covered
Correct.
LGBTQ. Let me just shout out to Secret Squirrel, $2 to show the love. Thank you, Secret Squirrel. You know I love you, Secret Squirrel. And my daughter's looking at me like, "Where's the Secret Squirrel?" That's my friend online. And let me get this $5 super chat. Really enjoying this collaboration. Thank you so much, Gene. Thank you so much. And we'll be on UnCivil Laws channel next. So please keep with it. But so the issue is that the Supreme Court in 6-3 decision favored the textualist understanding of it. Now, uncivil law is my favorite originalist, but he seems to not be an originalist when it comes to this one. So I'll let him explain his position. Go ahead.
Yeah. So yeah, I've often considered myself an originalist, but maybe I was secretly a textualist the whole time, because like textualism is the new hotness. Yeah. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to understand what words, from a textualist perspective, we're trying to understand what do the words mean, what Congress meant, and to make this even simpler, let's take it out of the legal context and just consider the literal conversation that we're having right now between Nate and myself, right? We are using words with particular meanings in mind. That's why we're able to have a conversation. And this is being recorded. And if someone 200 years from now should see this recording, what we mean between each other isn't going to change as a result of what someone 200 years from now is watching. They may not be able to understand our conversation. They may think we meant different things. Their understanding of it may change, but it can't influence what we are meaning right now. We are using words with a particular meaning in time. We have a common understanding of what it means. That's why we're able to have a conversation. So originalism or textualism stands for the proposition that whatever this conversation might mean, it means it right now, and whatever English or whatever else might happen 100 years, 200 years, 1,000 years from now cannot change what this means right now. That's basically what textualism or originalism means to me. So if Congress writes a law right now today, it has a particular meaning in time. They meant particular things with those particular words. And that's no less true if they wrote it in 1964. It's no less true if we're talking about the Constitution or the Bill of Rights. So that's where I start from. So we look to what things meant at the time and nothing more. So when we're looking to what does it mean to discriminate on the basis of sex? So we have a couple terms that we could be interpreting. Discriminate, basis of, sex. These are three things that we could potentially be interpreting. So to my mind, what I immediately want to go to is like, okay, well, what did that mean in 1964? What did those terms mean in 1964?
Well, can I step in? Can I step in just one?
Absolutely, sure.
I just want to step in just 1 second to say, in 1964, when they were passing this bill, there was a poison pill that was put into the bill, and that was that they would also protect gay and lesbian and transgendered people in the legislation. But that was specifically removed from the legislation because they didn't believe they can get enough votes to pass the legislation with those protections in it. So what they did was they removed those protections to get the bill passed. So specifically, it was litigated not litigated, but it was discussed. It was rejected, and the bill went forward. Go ahead, you can continue. Sorry.
No, you're absolutely 100% right. In the original draft, they did have specific language to deal with discrimination on the basis of people being gay, for example. And they took that language out, which may be suggestive of something. It may be suggestive of they didn't want to cover those things. So that would be one way to look at it. And again, if you're thinking about constitutional language, you can do this same kind of trick, because you can look through various drafts of constitutional language, and you can look to provisions that were in original drafts and then excluded. And so you can make the argument that by taking language out, they didn't want those things. Because if they did, they would have said it, and they knew what those words meant, and they took them out. So the absence of the words presumably means something. So that's an originalist idea. So this might be exactly where I split on originalism versus textualism. So an originalist might say, in 1964, they had the word sex and they had the word gay, and these were meant to be different. They took out the word gay, so whatever sex might mean, it can't mean gay. because they presumably wanted them to mean different things. They know how to use different words at different times. So that might be an originalist position. Whatever sex includes, it can't mean this. But
that was Alito's argument, right? That was a legal argument.
That's Alito's argument, and this is apparently where I get off the originalism train and become a textualist train. So Scalia, old and busted, Gorsuch, new hotness. It's all about the textualism now. So now we're just going to look to what the words mean. Well, what does it mean to discriminate? What does it mean to do on the basis of? What does it mean to do on sex? And the example that they used is I am a covered employer, so I am covered by this law. I hire 2 employees. One is a man and one is a woman. Both fall in love with a man, both get married to the man. I fire the man. Okay, did I fire the man because of sex, because of gay, or because of both? And what Gorsuch says is, well, you can't separate it, because even if you discriminate, even if you did on the basis of gay, he's only gay because he's a man. He wouldn't have been gay if he's a woman. That's what it would mean to be gay. If he were a woman, he wouldn't be gay. So only because he's a man, he's a gay. So yeah, you treat him differently because he's a man. If he were a woman, he wouldn't be gay. So there's no difference. I'm like, oh, okay, that's totally logical. You're right. I can't discriminate against the person who's gay without also discriminating on the basis of sex, because they wouldn't have been gay unless they were the other sex. So to treat someone differently or based on sex, it's implied. So yes, Congress, this is where the textualisms have their field day. Congress may not have wanted it. Congress may not have intended it. It may not have been what they meant. It may not have been anywhere in the back of their minds. It may not have been contemplated by anyone who wrote it. But if you just look at what the words mean and you follow the logic all the way through textualism, you're there. So apparently I've defected from originalism and I'm now a textualist somehow. So that's apparently a thing that happened.
Well, but the thing is that I will say this. I totally agree with the textualist argument, because I think it's more progressive too. Let's not pretend it's not a progressive argument. It's very strong on the textualist side, but it's textualist progressive.
Over here, I thought I was being conservative the whole time. Now you're using real slander against me. You're calling me a progressive. It
is. It's a protect, because you could be a textualist originalist and you could be a textualist progressive. You've taken a textualist progressive approach, which I agree with.
Oh my God.
No. But I will say this. I'm going to say it. The originalist argument could have won the day. And the only reason why I'm saying it could have won the day is because they make a very compelling argument. Their argument is, if you allow the Supreme Court to read in this particular provision, this protection for gay and transgendered people, what you're essentially doing is rewriting the statute that Congress rejected and creating a super legislature where the court says, well, even though they specifically left that out, we're going to put that in and then force everybody to act as if they passed it through that process. Which is this whole thing. Which
the
is
gay
that whole
discrimination clause was inside our hearts the whole time. We're not rewriting it. We're just okay.
But do you understand? But do you agree that if you're allowed to do that with any legislation, then you do run the risk of having a super legislature on the court, unelected judges creating new law, because that's what they did. They created new law.
This I'm very much opposed. Yeah, this I'm very much opposed. I think judges should interpret the law, not write new law. So I am totally on board with that. And so now it's just a question of which one is doing that. Is it becoming a super? Yeah, is it becoming a super legislature? Is Gorsuch the super legislature, or is Kavanaugh the super legislature? I guess that's the operative question.
Yeah, well,
who's being the super legislature?
Well, one is saying we're just going to do exactly what the legislature said. They said this is what it was. They rejected this. That's what we're going to leave it as. The other one is saying, well, technically, no, because you're right. I think the logic makes sense. No, sex means this, and this is the discrimination based on sex. So they may not have meant that, but that's exactly what they did. So I think that's the argument that's made for textualism. But it is a progressive textual understanding, because if you didn't have the outright rejection of it earlier, then I think you could say that. But since you did have that, and now the court has to kind of weave its way through it, you have two understandings here.
Well, it's certainly possible that you can have a whole bunch of terms in a clause, and these terms may be overlapping or even synonymous in some places. So you could say, for example, you may not bring vehicles or cars into a park. And the idea that a car is a type of vehicle, so maybe it was included in the concept of vehicles, but you could say it anyway as an explicit thing, even though it's like subsumed in the concept of vehicle. So that you could see legislation that would be along those lines that would make sense. So the idea that the concept of gay and the concept of sex, I mean, they have some relation. So
yeah, of course.
The idea that when you're discriminating on the basis of sex, there's no way to discriminate. The premise is you can't discriminate on the basis of gay without discriminating on the basis of sex.
Yes.
So therefore, the gay was inside of us the whole time. Who knew? Yeah, it's like, yeah.
So
But apparently I'm a progressive textualist, and so now I have to reconsider everything I ever believed in. And that's really good.
No,
news.
You're a progressive textualist in this particular instance. I think this I think this is one of those rare occurrences where textualism and originalism kind of have to split, and you kind of have to say, well, am I really an originalist or am I really a textualist? Because most times, so I think after this case, you're going to be back to your I'm an originalist in text, but I think now you're going to say I'm a textualist with some originalist leanings.
Yeah, I'm a textualist. I'm a textualist with originalist. I'm originalist curious.
Originalist curious. You're crazy.
Yeah.
Oh my God. All right. So the last thing on our list, because we've actually knocked almost everything out. So the last thing on our list is, how do we feel? It's a prediction now. What do we think is going to happen in the next couple of months? Because now, obviously, with the COVID thing blowing up, we have all these different things happening in 2020. I'm predicting personally that over the next couple of months, what we're going to see are lockdowns. So most of your states, people are, going around, but you're going to see lockdowns, mandatory lockdowns. We're going to go back to what we were, I think, 2 months ago, where everybody's locked down in the house, blah, blah, blah. Then we're going to go through some standard reopenings. Then numbers are going to go up and we're going to go to lockdowns again. So I'm thinking we're going to go through these cycles for maybe the next year to year and a half to 2 years. And I think that's realistic based on the fastest, unless you can get a vaccine within, record, that beats the world record by half, which I don't think is really possible, which I don't think is realistic. I think we have another 2 years maybe of this opening, closing until we reach herd immunity. What do you think?
That sounds pretty plausible. I mean, I think that sounds roughly right. The only other thing that we could be doing would be like really a really hard lockdown, and we'd have to go really hard about it for some period of time. And I don't know that people have the appetite for that. So yeah, the opening, closing, and tie goes in, ties goes out. You can't explain that.
Yeah.
Sounds about right. And you say that for 2 years, and then again, that's a 2 years with a big asterisk on it, because that's 2 by which we mean 4, or by which we mean 6, by which we mean So yeah, it makes my dating life incredibly hard because now every time I try to pick up a girl online, she can always say, "But COVID." I'm like, damn it!
Oh yeah,
COVID is COVID is the worst block of all time. It's coming in between me and my dating life, man. This is great.
Oh, look at Secret Girl says my prediction: human sacrifice, dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria. What movie is that from?
It's from Simpsons.
No, that is Ghostbusters.
You're right. You're
Ghostbusters,
correct.
the original Ghostbusters.
I am incorrect. You are correct, sir.
Human sacrifice, dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria. I remember the time. Secret Squirrel, you're showing us your age. Thanks for the $5 super chat. Secret Squirrel hurting us with the Ghostbusters. Yeah, I think you're right. I it's just unfortunate because I think Secret Squirrel says correct, Nate. Yeah, I'm an old guy. It's funny. You know what? I even hate to change the topic. My daughter, who's now peeking out at me right here, right? To show you how crazy the woke stuff has gotten. So I took my daughters to watch Ghostbusters, new Ghostbusters.
Why?
Because it was Ghostbusters. I love the original Ghostbusters with Bill Murray. But the original
is available on tape, you understand.
Of course, yeah. But the new Ghostbusters, new women, fight for the power. Let's go see it. So we go to the movie theater, me and my daughter, we watch it, and she says, "Daddy, this is the worst movie I've ever seen." She doesn't want it. Even when the commercials come on for Ghostbusters, she don't want to see nothing of it. So one day, I just happened to be watching Ghostbusters 2. So the movie just started. She comes and sits down, right? Ghostbusters 2. She watches the first 5 minutes and then watches the whole movie. So I'm like, "I thought you said you didn't like Ghostbusters." She says, that was Ghostbusters? I'm like, yeah, that was Ghostbusters. That's the same movie you watched. And it's interesting because I think what happens is I think we live in a society now that's so focused in on trying to be so woke that it's destroying the entertainment value of it.
The religion of woke is a whole conversation that I think is a real thing. It is seriously turning into a secular religion. There's ways to sin. There are priests who speak from on high about what the religion is, and we, the common person, can't understand it, from the texts that aren't available to us. There is sin. There might be redemption depending on who you are, and some people are just cast out without redemption. There is, if you don't pledge full allegiance to it, there's even, I saw this on the news where they're like doing the whole call response thing.
Yeah.
We believe in non-racism. We believe in non-racism. We are so woke. We are so woke. I'm like, oh, we're just doing full fat call and response now.
No.
And we might be able to buy ourselves out with indulgences and everything. We're just copying all the features of religion. This is great. Yeah, the Church of Woke can eat it.
You know what you got. The weird part about it is that I do movie reviews sometimes on my channel. For those of you who don't know, I do movie reviews, and I had done like a little bullshit like 5-minute review that I actually took down. But in the comment section, I had people saying, "Oh, you just don't, because it's women, you don't like it because of this," and I started feeling bad. I was like, "Oh my god, maybe they're right. Maybe I'm not woke enough." But then to see like a 7-year-old say one is trash, and I'm like, she's not woke, she knows good stuff too, and I knew good stuff, but it made me question whether I liked the movie because it was bad. I didn't like the movie because, I just wasn't woke enough. And then come to find out that it wasn't because I wasn't woke enough. It was because it happened to be a bad movie. And I understood what they were trying to do. But that's the same thing with Star Wars. Star Wars is bad now. Why? Because they wanted to wake us up with Star Wars. And there's a way you can do it. Don't get me wrong. There's a way that you can do it. And you can add these things and you can change character development, but you can't just shove it down my throat. And I think that's what's kind of happening now. And like, even now with, like, I can never run for office because they find one bad tweet and you're canceled. You know what I'm saying? Like right now, people go to my Twitter history, find one bad tweet and I'm done. And I think we're living in a world where you're trying to find the perfect person. And if you are trying to find the perfect person, then guess what? Everybody is going to fall short. You can't hear me?
No, I'm just saying it was me. It's me the whole time. I'm the perfect person.
Yeah, it just is. I don't know. It upsets me because at a point I'm you want to be right. You want to help people. You want to be in a society that's open to all, and I understand. But I think you have to do it in a way that's still entertaining. People still have to make money, and people still have to like it. And I think that's what's going on with this particular movement. They're looking, everybody has to be perfect or you aren't worth it. And that, no, everybody's going to fall short. Obama falls short, and I think that's the one great thing I do like about Trump is, if anything, is that he is the epitome of F the woke shit. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
He's just going to break it down. If you think, whatever you think is not woke, he is going to do it. Like Joey D says, Star Trek Discovery. Don't even get me started on Star Trek Picard. I call it Star Trek racism against everything. They're racist. Did you see Star Trek Picard? I
saw the first 2 episodes and then I gave up.
It was everybody's racist against everybody. We got to overcome. Like, this is the future. We still struggling with racism. 400 or 500 years in the future. Like, come on. I don't know. Maybe it's me, but I inevitably think that these things can be done, but it just has to be done in a way that's more entertaining.
It's your internalized oppression, Nate. You have become internalized oppression.
No, I want to be woke, but I want to be woke.
Really?
But I just don't want it to be shoved down my throat. I want to be more. It's funny because the ends of equality. I think all of us want equality. All of us want everybody to live in harmony. But don't shove it down my throat. Because you shove it down my throat.
I want equality of opportunity.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
I don't really particularly want equality of outcome. I just
That's
want
true.
people to be. I want people to be free to make their own decisions for better or worse, and disparate outcomes do not suggest unfair treatment along the way.
Well, I think also when you talk about this, just in the United States, I think you have a couple of different issues that I think just have to be resolved just fundamentally. Number one, the economic disparity problem is really, sure. I think, the core point of all this racial injustice and the reason why we have this inequality. It's just because the average black family, what is their wealth? Is something like $15,000, where the average white family is like $230,000. That wealth disparity just between races, and even Hispanics and most minorities, I think is telling in a sense of, let's just be honest. If you have a poor people who have less opportunities, they're going to be less more subject to crime and things of that nature versus, more affluent. If you have things, you have a house, you have interior wealth. So I think if the country can kind of solve that problem first, then we can start talking about like even school systems. Like my daughter goes to a school where if you walk through one door, she's in one of the best schools in the state of New York, but she walks through another door, she's in one of the worst schools in the state of New York. That's a real problem here in the city of New York. So I think really the core problem here is economic opportunity and making things equivalent to so like you're saying, people at least have the opportunity, the identical opportunities and the resources to take advantage of those opportunities. And I think that's the part that we're missing, those advantages to be able to take care of those to succeed in those opportunities. I don't know.
I think there's a lot of issues. I think economics are an issue. I think there's a problem with the loss of traditional households and mothers and fathers and some of the problems there. And, at least Nate, you're setting a great example by, showing people the way it should be. And I hope for it for myself someday, hence my grousing at my own lack of dating life issues. So,
well, hey, you got to go out there to a bar.
Yeah.
You had the bars just opened just a couple of days ago. You should have ran out there and ran to the bars, COVID it up.
Yeah, that's right.
Trust me, it's best to get COVID from something that you want than going out there and getting it from a door handle or something.
I guess I can't dispute that. That's right. Get COVID, at least have some fun along the way, I guess.
But now you're going to be shut in for a while. When do they consider opening up bars again?
I don't know. I don't think there's any plan right now. I think they just announced that like the big park here, Ziegler Park and Barden Pools, we have a big park here, kind of like the big parks, and they closed that down indefinitely. So I'm like, well, that's sad. So I don't know when we're doing things anymore. So
90 Day Fiance. I think you're gonna be on 90 Day Fiance, baby.
You think so? 90
Day Fiance. Hey, listen,
Eastern Europe. I think the love of my life is probably Eastern European. So if they want to send, I'm thinking Prague maybe, or
Colombians.
No, I'm thinking Eastern Europe, really.
Yeah, Eastern European.
Maybe Danish. That'd be good.
Well, I don't know. It's this whole crisis that we're going through. I just hope people realize, just unfortunately, that this is going to happen for a lot longer than people are thinking. The vaccine is not happening in September or June, and you're going into another cycle of lockdowns. And I just hope people are prepared for that. So I hate ending this stream on a downer, but is there anything else that you want to go over, bro? We've kind of circled the wagons.
No, it pretty much covers it. I'm just happy to be able to do a joint stream. It's been a while. I've been feeling a little unloved, so it's nice to be able to have a joint stream and just be able to talk with someone about issues and be called out for being a progressive or something. I don't know. And,
hey, you're a progressive textualist. For that case, you are a progressive textualist. You're not an originalist textualist.
I'm not looking at the outcome, man. I'm just trying to apply the rules. But,
All right. Hey, listen. Thank you for my.
I thought
progressive
Roberts
friend.
really got it wrong in the DACA decision. I'll tell you that for sure. I don't know where the hell he came up with that. So I don't know. I don't know. It's like, the Obama administration creates DACA effectively on the back of a napkin. I think it was a 4-page memo. It wasn't even I don't even know if it was an executive order. It certainly wasn't a regulation. So we create this thing essentially on the back of a cocktail napkin. The Trump administration wants to end it. And the Supreme Court says you didn't end it the right way. But it didn't start the right way. We just created it. And so what is that decision to me blows my mind. I cannot understand what Roberts was thinking. Do
you know the Matthews test? Have you ever heard of the Matthews test? Matthews test is the if the government gives you bestows some type of right or some type of something to you, and that have you qualify for like in Matthews. The Matthews test was there was a woman who had applied for welfare, and the state of, I believe, New York just more or less took it away from her. Right, said, hey, we're taking it away because you don't qualify. but they didn't give her any opportunity to be heard. There was a process. They didn't give her due process before they taken it away.
Sure.
So they said, well, hold on, we don't have to give her welfare. She qualified and we took it away. But they said, well, as soon as we gave you that right or that equity, then the government can't just take it away without due process of law because they've given you this particular opportunity.
Yeah.
So
well,
if you apply
the problem is in DACA, even the Obama administration never promised you more than 2 years. It was a 2-year program, and you could apply for renewal. So it was like you were only promised 2 years at a time. So if they want to end it and say, okay, well, we're just not going to renew anymore, we're not taking anything away because we never promised it to you in the first place. So it's like we're just not going to do this anymore.
Well, but the issue is that if I believe you're right, the whole you can reapply for it, but the premise of DACA from the Matthews test perspective is that the equity that they're giving the government or they're getting from the government is coming out, right? Is filing and showing the government this is who we are and putting yourself in jeopardy of being deported. Then by doing that and filling out that paperwork, two things happen. Number one, they would defer your what's it called by sending you back. They would defer that. And the second part of it is that you would have this renewal process every couple of years and you would be evaluated. So the court is saying that, hey, you can end it, but you would still have to address the due process issue of now these people who have held up their end of the bargain, you now have to end up how to hold your end of the bargain. Now, I think they can now the court said they can end it, but they said the way they just ended it just by ending it that way didn't address the due process because now these people do have the right of notice and opportunity to be heard as the APA lets short. So I'm just saying I don't agree with the ruling, but I understand why he came out with this notice and opportunity to be heard under the APA because that's the lowest level of due process owed when the government puts social right upon you. Well, I hope I explained that well.
Yeah, my sympathies are not there. So yeah. Anyways, yeah.
Well,
so
listen,
I'll invite people to go over to my channel UnCivil Law. I have a video posting in 20 minutes, as a matter of fact, on the originalism textualism thing. I'm responding to Randy Barnett and some other people who wrote an article trying to figure out what the heck they're talking about. That's today's video. Okay. And I try to post a video 6 days a week. So please go to my channel UnCivil Law. And yeah, it's been fun talking with you as always.
Oh, hold on. Let me do this before you go. Why don't you put a link in the description to your? I thought I had it right here. Hold on. Let me pull up a link to your video, to your channel, so I can throw it in the description. Please visit my man UnCivil Law, and we will be on your channel hopefully later this week or maybe even next week to do a part 2 of this, so we can start talking about current events. So, and maybe we
still have to wait for the rest of the Supreme Court term. We have to figure out about Trump's tax records. We have to figure out where half Oklahoma is. We have to figure out some other stuff. So there's still a Supreme Court term left to be had. So that'll be fun too.
Well, quick question: what do you agree about? What do you think about the Trump tax returns?
I think Congress is going to get it. I think that they have to have a valid legislative purpose. I think we have like once or twice said no, and it's been 50 or 100 years since we said no. I think they have a valid legislative purpose in looking at the ethics reform. I don't think they're presidential records. They're personal records. The fact he's president is kind of irrelevant. So I think Congress gets their records. That's what I think.
Yeah, I think that's where we're at. The UnCivil Laws link is in the description under my name. You guys can see it. But yeah, I think at the end of the day, when it comes down to it, the law is very clear. And yeah, and just because he's president, it's going to be. And even if he loses presidency, but I wonder what those tax returns are going to say. I'm not going to lie. I am desperate to see those tax returns.
I don't think the tax returns are going to really say anything that's going to be massively shocking. I think it's going to be a nothing burger at the end of the day. Maybe he isn't as rich as everyone thought, and that's about all that's really going to be exposed. I'm not expecting to see anything that's going to be devastating in those records. But that they're going to be leaked the second that Congress gets a hold of them. There's no doubt in my mind that they get on Twitter immediately. So, yeah, but I think he gets his records. I think the guy in New York gets his records too. It's not unduly harassing. They have a legitimate grounds to do it. They have legitimate reason. I think it's a reasonably easy decision. I think the fact he's president is it's not unduly burdensome. It's not harassing the presidency. It's fine. So I don't see any problem. Yeah, so that should be fun.
Well, the last thing, and hopefully next time we'll talk about this. We should table this the next time. But whether President Trump is being blackmailed. that seems to be now the running theory in a lot of the law enforcement circles. I was talking to a.
You think someone has something on Trump that he wants to keep out at this point? You think Trump actually gives enough of a damn to be blackmailed?
Yeah, I think it. Well, honestly, I can't say he is being blackmailed, but it's all the telltale signs of blackmail. For instance, like the fact that he had what's his name, Erdogan from Turkey, on a line where wherever he was at on the planet Earth, Erdogan gets put through immediately at the same time. Maybe they were working on something, the Vladimir Putin stuff. There's a lot there that could suggest it. But I think in answer to Pelosi was irresponsible by saying that has something on them, unless you have raw evidence. Us just theorizing is one thing, but her, I think, in an elected position saying that the president is being blackmailed, I think that's kind of, hold on, slow down here. You're in a position of power. But I don't think it's out of the realm to think Putin may have something on him. I just don't know. I don't know if it's forcing his judgment, but I think there's an argument that could be made. So, is it true? Yeah. I just don't know.
All right, man. I'm gonna end the stream.
Yeah, I'm about to get out of here. Listen, guys, thanks again for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed our 2 hours here. My name is Nate, UnCivil Lord. Link in the description. Thanks again for watching, and I'm going to holler at you guys later. I'm gonna end broadcast. 3, 2, 1.